I stood in my skyscraper office, the Seattle skyline sharp and cold beneath my gaze, holding the ultimate invitation, a text message demanding my presence at the family Christmas. For years, my name, Jessica Harris, was synonymous with failure. In their eyes, a stark contrast to my golden child brother Ethan, whose entitlement they treasured. Building my $200 million tech firm, Innovatech Dynamics, didn't earn me a seat at the table. It earned me banishment, deemed an alternative lifestyle that threatened their fragile social standing. When my parents finally decided my existence was too inconvenient for their high society Christmas debut, they banished me. They wanted me to be their embarrassment. I realized I had to use the one thing they couldn't control, my success, to expose their betrayal. How do you respond when the people who should lift you up try to break you down? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The scent of burnt plastic and soldering flux still clings to my memory, sharp and acrid mixed with the sickeningly sweet smell of cheap school cafeteria coffee. I was 12, and I had just won the state science fair, the youngest ever to sweep the senior division with my automated hydroponic system. The golden trophy felt heavy and cold in my hands, a shining testament to hundreds of lonely hours spent in the garage. I scanned the auditorium past the proud, beaming faces of other parents for my own. My parents, Robert and Martha Harris, weren't there. They hadn't come. My father's text message, received minutes before the awards began, was short and professionally dismissive. "Big game for Ethan today. Team support needed. Congrats on the project." Ethan, 3 years younger, the golden child, was playing in a junior soccer scrimmage that meant absolutely nothing. I was holding a piece of hardware that guaranteed a full college scholarship and a national competition entry. To them, my victory was an inconvenient scheduling conflict. That trophy became the first piece of a growing collection of hard-earned accomplishments that to my family always felt like a perennial second-place ribbon, eternally overshadowed by the mere potential of my brother Ethan. That day, I learned my worth was invisible to the people who were supposed to see it first. Now, 18 years later, I stand in my office high above the sprawling concrete and glass heart of Seattle, and I feel that same cold isolation, but it's mixed with the formidable controlled power that comes from building something out of nothing. I am Jessica Harris, 30 years old. To the outside world, to the press, and to the shareholders who entrust me with millions, I am Victoria Harris, founder and CEO of Innovatech Dynamics. The name change was subtle. Victoria is my middle name, but necessary. It was a suit of armor against the vulnerability of being Jessica. The floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office offer a breathtaking panoramic view of Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains, a dizzying vertical testament to the life I clawed into existence without a single cent or word of encouragement from my blood. Ethan, bless his entitled heart, is 27 and still orbiting my parents' orbit. His trajectory reads like a spoiled travelogue dropped out of a costly private liberal arts college they paid for. 2 years of finding himself in Southeast Asia on their dime. Another year consulting for a friend's failed startup, also funded by Robert. Ethan, a man whose professional expertise peaked at knowing how to order a latte, remains their great potential. They constantly leverage his meager social connections for their own shallow validation, particularly now with his new girlfriend, Savannah Beaumont. Savannah is everything I am not. Harvard MBA, family money, and an established socialite who is allegedly fast-tracked to partnership at a major consulting firm. My parents call every few weeks not to ask about the complex, life-changing AI algorithms we're developing, but to crow about Savannah's latest social coup or her family's summer house in the Hamptons. My hard work, the 70-hour weeks, the near bankruptcy scares, the intellectual property portfolio, is reduced by my mother Martha to playing with computers. Ethan's entitlement is always lovingly rebranded as potential. I pull up the year-end reports. Innovatech Dynamics is officially valued at over $200 million. Our expansion into the European market is set for Q1. It's a staggering, beautiful success. I feel a familiar, desperate heat rise in my chest. Surely this is enough. I think. Surely a success this large, this undeniable must finally earn their respect. It's a raw, juvenile hope that I should have choked out years ago, but it lingers, that fragile, desperate need for a parent's simple pride. I contemplate calling them, envisioning Robert's severe face, finally softening with approval, Martha's endless stream of Savannah facts, pausing for a single genuine inquiry about my life. I know the risk. I know the near certainty of rejection. I put the phone down, opting instead to draft a memo to my VP of engineering. The internal debate rages. Stay invisible and safe, or try one last time for acceptance. The question is answered for me an hour later. My phone vibrates with an unfamiliar text tone. It's from my father, Robert. He hasn't texted me since my college graduation. The message is short, almost a command. Christmas is at our house this year. Important guests will be present. We expect you to be there, Jessica. Don't be late. My stomach flips. My heart is a frantic bird against my ribs. Despite the cold, demanding tone, a wave of relief and dizzying hope washes over me. They are inviting me. They expect me. Maybe, just maybe, the tide is finally turning. Maybe they see Victoria, the CEO, and realize she belongs at their table. I read the text again, noting the mandatory tone, the implied social pressure, but unable to dim the unexpected, blinding light of potential acceptance. It feels like a starting gun. The dread is there, a low hum beneath the excitement, but for now, hope takes center stage. I mark the date on my calendar, the uncertainty of what this gathering means, hanging heavy and silent in the vast empty space of my successful, isolated life. 3 days after the text message, the phone call came. It was Martha, my mother, and her voice was sickly sweet, a sound I'd learned to dread because it always preceded a request or a subtle, painful put-down. She didn't ask how I was. She launched straight into the details of the winter solstice dinner, as she insisted on calling our usual chaotic Christmas Eve gathering. "Savannah is handling the wine selection, darling," she cooed, "and her mother is loaning us a few pieces from their estate silver. You simply won't believe the provenance." The conversation was a steady, suffocating stream of Savannah Beaumont's prestige, Harvard MBA, fast-tracked career path. Her father's golf buddies were titans of industry. Martha wasn't telling me this because she was proud of Ethan. She was telling me this because she was desperate for the validation Savannah's reflected glow provided. The implication was clear: Savannah was the functional, aspirational accessory to their family unit. My self-made tech career, my $200 million valuation, was just sweet, a charming hobby. Savannah's social pedigree was practical. She was the winner of the game I wasn't even allowed to play. I hung up the phone with a slow, building burn of outrage that mixed with the familiar stinging pain of being deliberately diminished. I was invited, yes, but only as a footnote, a small, safe item that wouldn't upset the balance of their grand social debut. The definitive blow landed a week later, 7 days before Christmas. The festive buzz of the Seattle winter, usually a comfort, felt mocking. The call was from Robert, my father. His voice was cold, brief, and absolute, cutting straight to the bone. "Jessica," he started without preamble, "your mother and I have had a discussion. We think it might be best if you don't come this year." My breath hitched in my throat. I stood up from my desk, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "What?" I managed the word, barely a whisper. Robert continued, his tone that of a judge delivering an unwelcome but necessary sentence. "Savannah's family is joining us briefly before they leave for Aspen. Her father is a major player. We can't afford any complications. Your presence, it risks complicating things." I pressed him. "Complicate what, Dad? I'm the CEO of a successful firm. What exactly is the risk?" His answer was delivered like a truth too obvious to dispute. "Your independence, Jessica. That whole independent woman thing, your career obsession. The way you always have to be so successful. It's an alternative lifestyle, and we need to present a respectable traditional front for the Beaumonts. We need stability for Ethan." The receiver might as well have been a physical weapon. The shock and devastation were immediate. I wasn't being disinvited for a logistical issue. I was being banished because my existence, my autonomy, my hard-won success, my single status was an active liability. I was a visible rejection of the very traditional subservient image they desperately wanted to project. I had been banned from Christmas, not because of anything I had done, but because of who I was. I sat back in my chair, the phone slipping from my grasp onto the polished oak desk. I stared out at the dizzying heights of the city I owned, and the view blurred into a kaleidoscope of glass and light. The tears came hot and messy, a visceral grief that was decades in the making. It wasn't the pain of a single fight. It was the total agonizing collapse of every childhood hope, every dream of earning their approval. I cried for the 12-year-old girl with the golden trophy who wasn't worth the 20-minute drive, and I cried for the 30-year-old woman who, despite building an empire, was still deemed not good enough to sit at her family's table. This was my lowest point of vulnerability, a complete and total emotional surrender to the cruelty of my own parents. But somewhere deep in the core of that sorrow, something broke free. The tears stopped, not out of exhaustion, but out of a surge of ice-cold, righteous resolve. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my blouse, squared my shoulders, and looked at the city no longer as a victim, but as the architect of my own destiny. I realized that my most fundamental American value, my self-reliance, my resilience, my personal freedom, was the very thing they were trying to suppress. They wanted me small, quiet, and dependent. They wanted me to be ashamed of my own agency. They wanted me to spend my life chasing an approval that was designed to be unattainable. This was the pivot. The grief was gone, replaced by a singular, focused determination. They had banned me for my success. I would weaponize my success against their entitlement. They saw me as a liability. I would become their inescapable reality. I picked up the desk phone and dialed my loyal executive assistant, Ava Chen. My voice was unnervingly calm, without a trace of the recent tears. "Ava," I said, "clear my calendar for the next 2 weeks. Everything. And book me a ticket to Pittsburgh for the 26th. Next, I called Marcus Bell, my HR director. "Marcus, I need an immediate confidential meeting. We need to review the hiring protocol for all senior positions that are currently open." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. I need to understand every layer of protection against unqualified candidates. I want to see every application. I need to make absolutely certain that the system is uncorrupted. The engine of the inevitable had begun to turn. I knew what I was doing, and the certainty of it felt like the purest form of revenge, the delivery of truth. 3 months passed. The sting of the Christmas banishment was no longer raw, but a hard, cold knot of resolve permanently lodged beneath my ribs. I poured myself entirely into Innovatech Dynamics, seeking solace and purpose in the one arena where merit, not blood, was the currency of success. The expansion planning, the product development, the investor relations, all of it became a shield against the residual pain and a testament to my own self-worth. I was surgical, demanding, and utterly focused. My team, the community I had chosen, noticed the change. Ava Chen, my sharp, fiercely loyal executive assistant, would occasionally eye me with a worried glance, recognizing the almost surgical intensity with which I operated. But she never questioned it. This company, these people represented a genuine, healthy expression of the American value of earned success, a stark contrast to the entitlement that suffocated my personal life. The opportunity I had prepared for the fate I had been anticipating arrived one crisp March afternoon. Marcus Bell, our HR director, entered my office without knocking, something he rarely did. His usual composure was rattled. He looked like a man holding a ticking bomb. He closed the door, walked to my desk, and wordlessly placed a thick manila folder in front of me. It was an application for the Senior Business Development Lead role, a critical high-level position responsible for securing 7-figure contracts and managing complex technical projects. My eyes scanned the top sheet. The name was impossible to mistake: Ethan Harris. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, a dry, dusty gasp. I hadn't seen him in over a year, but there was his face on the ID photo, smiling with that same undeserved confidence. I quickly scanned the resume, noting the immediate and egregious resume padding. Consultant became strategy executive. A summer internship became project lead. The entire document was a house of cards built on vague achievements and blatant self-aggrandizement. The universe, in its own darkly poetic way, had delivered the object of my impending confrontation directly to my desk. "Were you aware of this, Victoria?" Marcus asked, using my professional name, his voice carefully low. I shook my head, my gaze locked on the paper. "No, not a clue." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "He was arrogant during the phone screen. Extremely condescending to the junior recruiters demanding to speak to someone who actually makes decisions. He bragged about his potential and connections right out of the gate, implying that our technical requirements were beneath him." Marcus confirmed what I already knew: Ethan was utterly unqualified for the technical aspects of the role, lacking proficiency in the necessary programming languages and project management methodologies. His continued display of entitlement only cemented my growing resolve. I leaned back in my chair, turning the folder over and over in my hands. This was my moral crossroads. I could reject him immediately, citing a lack of basic qualifications. It would be easy. It would be justified. But I knew with a sinking certainty that my parents and Ethan would dismiss the rejection as petty revenge. They would never believe it was based on merit. The only path to true catharsis, the only way to surgically excise the poison of their dismissal, was complete, undeniable transparency. I had to force them to see the truth through a lens they couldn't corrupt: the unyielding fairness of the professional world I had built. I had to weaponize merit. "We advance him to the in-person interview," I announced, my voice a flat, steady line. Marcus looked stunned. "But Victoria, he doesn't meet the core competencies." "I know," I countered, tapping the section on his resume where he listed high-level strategic networking. "But he cited his invaluable connections and strategic vision as critical assets. Let's test that hypothesis. Let's see how well he articulates that vision under scrutiny. Use that as the minimal justification for advancement." My instruction was clear and absolute. I would observe the interview, anonymously, introduced only as a senior board observer. My first name, Jessica, was forbidden in the interview room. My title would be masked. The panel will not know I am his sister. They will not know my full name. I will only be introduced as Victoria Harris, a senior observer. The trap was sprung. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in my office, the city lights below mirroring the intensity in my gut. I carefully laid out my sharpest, most intimidating navy suit. I called the interview panel Marcus, the technical lead, and the head of project management to finalize the agenda. I reviewed the complex technical questions that would serve as the ultimate litmus test, questions that demanded specific, verifiable knowledge. I wanted to challenge him, yes, but not unfairly. I wanted to challenge him appropriately for the job he sought. I looked out the window past the glass reflecting the CEO office and spoke the thought aloud, feeling the familiar vulnerability of Jessica dissolving into the controlled power of Victoria. "It's time to cash the check my parents wrote," I whispered into the quiet steel and glass night. Tomorrow, Ethan would not be meeting his overlooked sister. He would be meeting his CEO. The tension was almost unbearable. The calm before the storm, a perfect, terrifying stillness. The conference room was everything my childhood home was not: sleek, efficient, and built on verifiable merit. It was designed to intimidate, located on the top floor of the skyscraper, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a dizzying cinematic view of the city I now commanded. The furniture was minimalist, the air hushed, a perfect elevated stage for the confrontation I had meticulously engineered. I arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in the tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back, feeling the armor of Victoria Harris settle firmly around me. I took my seat in the observer section next to Marcus Bell and the technical lead, becoming one more silent suit against the wall. This was not an ambush. It was the delivery of inevitable consequences. The tension in the air was palpable, thicker than the expensive coffee set out on the sideboard. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the door opened. Ethan strode in, radiating a false confidence that instantly grated on my nerves. He was polished, wearing a suit that was undoubtedly purchased with my parents' money, and he carried himself with the same air of entitled superiority that had defined my entire childhood. He barely glanced at the observers, his focus fixed on the interview panel, Marcus, the technical expert, and the head of project management. For a fleeting, agonizing second, I was that little girl again, watching from the sidelines as the golden child took the spotlight. But then I looked at the view at the company logo etched into the glass wall and remembered the 7 years of grinding work that had built this room. I straightened my spine. I was the architect here, and this was my arena. Ethan's performance was just as predictable as Marcus had warned. He launched into an aggrandizing monologue about leveraging synergies and disruptive vision, peppering his speech with shallow technical buzzwords. When the technical lead pressed him for specifics on his experience with large-scale data migration or managing Kanban sprints, Ethan grew instantly dismissive. "I delegate that to the technical team," he said with a condescending chuckle, repeating the familiar painful dismissal. "People like me aren't hired for that. We're hired for the big picture for the network." His arrogance was the gasoline on my fire of righteous indignation. Finally, the panel wrapped up their formal questions, and Marcus looked pointedly toward the observer section. "Before we conclude, our CEO has a final few questions for you, Mr. Harris. She observes all senior-level interviews." I rose slowly, deliberately, my movements measured and controlled every step across the marble floor, closing the distance between his delusion and my reality. The sound of my heels seemed deafening in the silence. I walked directly to the empty chair on the other side of the table, pulling it out and taking the seat directly opposite him. Ethan's smile dissolved. His face, initially expectant, cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally abject terror. His mouth opened and closed silently like a fish out of water. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table. I extended my hand. My voice was low, clear, and utterly professional, devoid of any warmth or familial recognition. "Hello, Ethan. It's been a while. My name is Victoria Harris." His clammy hand gripped mine, a pathetic, weak contact. He finally managed to speak, his voice a dry croak. You're the CEO." "Victoria Harris, founder and CEO of Innovatech Dynamics." I confirmed, pulling my hand back. "I recused myself from the initial screening process. I make the final decision on all senior hires." I opened the folder on the table. The professional takedown began. I ignored the terror in his eyes, treating him as I would any unqualified candidate. "Your resume lists strategy executive. I contacted a mutual contact at your current firm last week who confirmed your role is marketing associate. Could you reconcile that discrepancy for the panel?" His stammered excuse about a functional title was weak. I moved on. "You claim proficiency in Python and Java. Can you briefly walk us through the security protocols required for building an API integration in either language?" He visibly wilted. "I oversee teams that handle that, Victoria. I focus on strategy." "I see," I said, closing the folder with a sharp snap. "My final question concerns your stated value proposition. You mentioned you have invaluable connections that can refer lucrative business to Innovatech. Please be specific. Which high-level contacts have you personally translated into 7-figure contracts in your current role?" He shifted uncomfortably, finally admitting that his connections were mostly second-hand, leveraged through Savannah Beaumont's family relationships he had not earned and did not possess. The truth in this professional, merit-based environment was a surgical blade. The moment of vindication was absolute. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Harris. HR will be in touch." I stood up, ending the interview. Ethan was a shell of his former self, gathering his portfolio with trembling hands. As Marcus escorted him toward the door, Ethan turned back to look at me, and for the first time in his life, he didn't see his little sister. He saw the CEO who had just judged him solely on his own merits and found him wanting. He was barely out the door before the office phone on my desk rang. It was the reception desk. Ms. Harris, your parents Robert and Martha Harris are in the lobby. They are demanding to see you immediately. They seem... The receptionist paused delicately. Agitated. I looked at Marcus and Ava, who were watching me with a mixture of professional awe and deep concern. The family conflict had officially breached the walls of my professional sanctuary. My eyes hardened with cold resolve. This was no longer just about Ethan. This was about forcing Robert and Martha to face the consequences of their dismissive actions. Marcus, Ava, I instructed, my voice unwavering. Bring them up, and both of you will remain here. This discussion will be documented. It will be professional. I was the CEO, and I was fully prepared for the final necessary confrontation. I would not allow them to use their outdated toxic emotional rules in my domain. The door slammed open not by Ethan, but by Robert Harris, his face a mask of scarlet fury. Martha trailed behind him, her eyes darting nervously around the opulence of my office. The sweeping view, the abstract art, the awards displayed on the credenza, her rage momentarily tempered by awe. "What the hell was that, Jessica?" Robert roared, advancing toward my desk. "You ambushed your brother. You intentionally made him look incompetent in front of your employees. This is nothing but petty, vicious revenge." I remained seated, the anchor in the storm. The presence of Ava Chen and Marcus Bell flanking me like silent professional guards gave me immense strength. "Hello, Dad, Mom," I said, my voice low and steady. "Please sit down. As Marcus informed you, this discussion is documented and it will remain professional. You are in my workplace." Robert ignored the invitation. "You are the CEO. You can hire him with a stroke of a pen. That's what family does for each other." That was the line. The tired, toxic expectation. I stood up, leaning over my desk, meeting his gaze with an intensity he'd never seen from me. "No," I countered, my voice cracking slightly with the force of decades of suppressed pain. "That is what corrupt families do. And since you brought up family obligations, let's talk about them." I looked pointedly at Martha, then back at Robert. "What did family do for me? You left me alone at the science fair. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while you funded Ethan's gap year. And you most recently banned me from attending Christmas because you feared my success would embarrass you in front of Savannah Beaumont's family." A choked sound escaped Martha. Robert flinched, his anger momentarily replaced by a deep, uncomfortable shame. "We are getting off topic," he growled, attempting to regain control. "The topic is the job." "No." I insisted, my voice rising in a final climactic release of the unvarnished truth. "The topic is merit versus entitlement. Ethan is not qualified for a senior position at a $200 million firm built on integrity. You need to understand that the world outside your living room doesn't operate on favoritism." I turned to Marcus, gesturing to the folder. "Marcus, please reiterate the essential requirements for the senior business development lead position." Marcus, clear and concise, listed the technical proficiencies Ethan lacked. Robert demanded I make an exception. I conceded, my eyes locked on his. "But I won't. My company's success is dependent on placing the right people in the right roles." The words delivered the professional judgment he could not argue against. Then I delivered the hard offer, not as a sister, but as a CEO offering a path to self-respect. I looked at the empty spot where Ethan had sat. "However, we do have an entry-level marketing analyst position available. Ethan can apply for it. He would start at the bottom, earn the necessary skills, and work his way up based entirely on performance. That is the only path to a sustainable career here." Ethan's old chair might as well have been a guillotine. Robert stared at me, his face a mixture of defeat and lingering fury. "You are torturing your brother," he accused, "always trying to prove you're superior." I don't need to prove anything, I stated, feeling the immense catharsis of that truth. I built this firm from nothing. I simply refused to destroy it with nepotism. My parents left shortly after defeated. Robert spat, "This is pointless. We're leaving." Martha, however, paused at the door. Her eyes for the first time weren't accusatory or critical. They were assessing. "Your office is remarkable, Jessica," she murmured. "You've done well." It wasn't an apology, but it was a quiet, almost stunned acknowledgement of the world I had created. I sat down exhausted but completely powerfully free. The fallout was swift. The next day, Ethan was fired from his current job after his boss found out about the interview. A week later, he called me sounding broken. Savannah Beaumont had ended the engagement, stating she needed to focus on her career trajectory. The just desserts were served, but I felt no malice, only a strange sense of closure and pity. 2 weeks later, Robert and Martha showed up at my apartment unannounced, the very apartment they had never visited. They looked older, smaller, their arrogance deflated. Robert got straight to the point. "Ethan lost his job. Savannah left. He's struggling." Martha, however, delivered the imperfect apology. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, Jessica. We were unkind. We didn't want to see what you built because it showed us how little we accomplished by leaning on others. It was cruel to exclude you from Christmas." I accepted the apology, but I established the new boundaries. "I appreciate the acknowledgement. But we move forward with respect, or we don't move forward at all. I will never downplay my success to make you comfortable again." The reconciliation was tentative. Ethan, humbled, called Marcus Bell and took the entry-level analyst job. He started at the bottom, determined to earn my place. He was finally embarking on the journey I had completed a decade ago. My final victory was internal. I realized my true value was never dependent on their recognition. My new freedom was the ability to choose my family, my friends, my professional community, and now perhaps a renegotiated, distant but honest relationship with my parents. Standing up for myself did not ruin my family. It allowed for the only honest, merit-based connection we had ever shared. I was no longer the vulnerable Jessica seeking approval. I was Victoria Harris, the architect of her own life, whole and empowered. And so Jessica Harris finally found peace, trading the empty chase for approval for the solid ground of self-respect. If this story of betrayal and ultimate triumph resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and give us a like. What did you think of Jessica's final stand? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.